I died. To please my sister, my husband stripped me of my clothes and hung me on the city wall. I was left to die, hung in front of a crowd. After a dizzying moment, I woke up again. I was 16 once more. At this moment, I was still the eldest daughter of the Gao family in the capital. My sister Gao Shi, drenched in water, knelt by grandmother's feet and cried. I don't know what I did to upset my sister, but she pushed me into the water.
Ah,
Before she could finish, I grabbed her by the hair and pulled her up. As she screamed like a pig being slaughtered, I kicked her into the lake. Is that so? Gao Shi struggled, and as soon as her head surfaced, I shoved her back down. You love to lie, so here's what you wanted. In my previous life, I admired the seventh prince, Li Qingrui. After marrying him, I found out that he didn't want me at all. He wanted my cousin Gao Shi. It was because my father had been a trusted advisor to the emperor. Whoever married me would earn favor in the emperor's eyes. Li Qingrui wanted to contend for the throne, so he reluctantly married me. Eventually, he became the crown prince. On the night I was made crown princess, Li Qingrui abandoned me to personally bring Gao Shi into the palace. Gao Shi cried pitifully. My sister has always stolen my things, and now she's even taken His Highness from me. Later, Gao Shi framed me, accusing me of conspiring with Li Qingrui's enemies. Li Qingrui didn't even investigate. He threw me into prison. But that wasn't enough. To cheer up Gao Shi, he eventually had me hung on the city wall, left to die. The painful memories flooded back, and I tightened my grip on Gao Shi's hand. The Gao family finally reacted and rushed to pull me away. Grandmother trembled in fury. You've gone too far. Gao Shijin. Did all those books go to your head? You still think you can marry after this? Marry. In my past life, that was all they would talk about, making me think that marriage was the ultimate goal of a woman's life. By the time I realized the truth, it was too late. Grandmother, with a loving expression, held Gao Shi close, cooing sweet words to her. Then she turned to scold me. Gao Shijin, kneel and apologize to your sister.
Pa.
I spat at her. Grandmother clutched her chest, nearly fainting. You ungrateful child. If I hadn't pitied you and brought you back to the Gao family, you'd have died in some nameless grave by now. You're just like your good-for-nothing mother. Don't mention my mother. The moment she did, my anger flared up. I grabbed the vicious old woman by the collar and slapped her fiercely. Grandmother had lived on a plain diet for years, her body as thin as a skeleton. After staggering a few steps, she clutched her precious granddaughter and fell into the lake again. The backyard of the Gao estate was filled with screams. It was music to my ears. Crazy. She's really gone mad. When grandmother crawled out of the water, she muttered endlessly. I knew it all along. Your mother was a lowly merchant, and you're just a worthless girl. I raised my hand to strike her again, but the servant stopped me. Grandmother dared only to hide behind them, continuing to curse. Ungrateful wretch. If it weren't for the Gao family, you would have died with your parents. We have no descendants like you. I have no granddaughter like you. Fine, everyone heard it. From now on, I sever all ties with the Gao family. I meant it. I packed my belongings and left that very day. As I walked out, Gao Shi and grandmother were still in a daze behind me. Grandmother, are we really letting her go? Who will pay for everything now?
Don't worry.
Once she leaves the Gao family, how long do you think that little girl will last? Believe me, within 3 days, she'll come crying back to us. I smiled without replying. Who will be crying, I wonder? My maternal family was a family of merchants, looked down upon by the Gao family. In my previous life, I lost my parents at an early age. Grandmother, Zhou Wan, disdainfully took me back to the Gao estate. From then on, I was confined within the estate, with no friends and no freedom. She would say, a woman must be virtuous and serve men her whole life. She would say, if you don't marry a good husband, you'll disgrace the Gao family. She also said, you must be more humble than others because you have the blood of a lowly merchant in you. You'll bring shame to the Gao family. I was only 6 at the time, and if I didn't behave, I'd be left hungry. Growing up in hunger, I became cautious and careful. I willingly locked myself in the obedient cage until I married into the imperial palace and left the Gao family. Only then did I learn that my maternal family was no ordinary merchant family. They were the richest in Jiangnan, and my mother had left me a bank. While I knelt in the ancestral hall, reciting the precepts for women, Zhou Wan and Gao Shi were squandering my mother's wealth. When I went hungry because I couldn't memorize the woman's virtue, they used my name to demand boxes of antler and bear paws from my maternal family. Later, Gao Shi's affair with Li Qingrui was exposed. Zhou Wan, with a calm expression, lectured me. If you voluntarily give up the position of crown princess, the world will praise you for your generosity. Before her death, Zhou Wan revealed a secret. My mother had been forced to death by her. She looked down on merchants and despised my mother for sullying the Gao family name. So she secretly found some people to humiliate my mother. Unable to bear the humiliation, my mother hung herself. My father, devastated, soon passed away from grief. I still remember Zhou Wan's smug expression. Your father never knew why your mother died. Before he passed, he called me mother, asking me to take good care of you. My father was not Zhou Wan's son.
Zhou Wan was just a concubine.
After the real grandmother passed away, she used every trick to climb to the main wife position. Gao Shi was her real granddaughter. I was on the brink of death at the time, unable to speak, but my hatred spread through my limbs. I would avenge my parents. They couldn't die so easily. I would make them suffer in agony and despair before they met their end. 3 days later, I indeed returned to the Gao residence.
It was Gao Shi's birthday.
The Gao family hosted a grand banquet in her honor. Nearly all the women of the capital attended, and Li Qingrui himself came as well. I couldn't miss the commotion. Before the banquet began, Gao Shi and Li Qingrui were hiding behind the corridor, speaking to each other. In a few moments, Gao Shi was on the verge of tears, almost leaning into Li Qingrui's arms. I guess they were complaining about me. I walked over slowly, and without urgency. The moment Li Qingrui saw me, he seemed stunned. In the past, due to Grandma Zhou Wan's strict control over me, I was only allowed to wear plain-colored clothes. But now, I wore my mother's vibrant robes from when she was alive. I had skin as fair as my mother's, which complemented bright colors beautifully. Li Qingrui stared at me in a daze for a long time before snapping back to reality. Ah, Jean, what are you doing here? Can I come? Don't misunderstand. I only ran into Miss Gao here by chance. Whatever. I walked past them without even looking at him. Li Qingrui noticed something was wrong. Ah, Jean, are you angry? He hurried after me, trying to stop me. I swear it was just a coincidence with Miss Gao. Let go. I lifted my eyes and gave him a cold look. Just that one glance made Li Qingrui tremble, and he seemed to lose his composure, letting go of my arm. He remained frozen in place, staring at me as I walked away. Half an hour later, the banquet officially began. Zhou Wan was quite pleased with my uninvited arrival. She stirred her tea, smiling. I told you so, didn't I? 3 days and you'd be back. Gao Shijin, did you come to give our Shi a birthday gift? There is a surprise, I replied. Upon hearing this, Gao Shi proudly raised her chin, waiting for me to flatter her with a gift. She showed no sign of the guilt she had earlier when I caught them. Zhou Wan said, All right, you've made an effort. Today, for your sister's sake, after presenting the gift, kneel down and apologize to us, and you can leave the Gao family. Who says I'm going back to the Gao residence? I smiled slightly and presented the surprise. Come, take everything belonging to the Shin family in this house. Not even a single blade of grass is allowed to stay. I was well prepared for this trip. My mother had left me a money house in the capital. Her former maid stayed in the city, ensuring the money house ran smoothly. It wasn't for wealth, but to ensure my food and clothing were taken care of. Over the years, the Gao family, using my name, had made endless demands from the money house, even asking for the flowers and plants in the garden. Aunt Shin had never refused. Unfortunately, I had been confined within the Gao family and never had the chance to meet her. She had always thought I was living well as a daughter of a noble family. When I was imprisoned, Aunt Shin had tried everywhere to rescue me, but eventually became ill from the stress. Later, under Li Qingrui's indulgence, the Gao family sent people to raid the money house and take its wealth for themselves. The Jiangnan Shin family was also implicated and suffered greatly. But now, everything could still be salvaged. Aunt Shin was meticulous. Every penny spent by the Gao family over the years was recorded. Today, I had come to collect the debt. I recounted all the mistreatment and grievances I had suffered. The guests were in an uproar, and Li Qingrui looked equally surprised. Zhou Wan panicked. "Stop slandering. The Gao family raised you for all these years. There's no credit, but certainly hardship. How can you be so ungrateful? This truly disappoints me." I said, "Let's settle the accounts. Last year, Shun's money house gave me a birthday gift, the pair of gold mandarin duck bracelets, and now they're on Gao Shi's wrists." Gao Shi hurriedly pulled her wrist into her sleeve. "Last month, Shun's gave me a golden threaded Tanhua fox fur coat, and now it's on you." Zhouwan was caught in a dilemma, unsure whether to wear the coat or not. Whispers and murmurs filled the air. Zhouwan's eyes darted around before she regained her composure. "Gao Shijin, the account book was brought out by you unilaterally. You've had plenty of time to manipulate it. You could easily claim something that isn't yours." "True," I nodded. Zhouwan thought I had surrendered and let out a sigh of relief. "So, you should kneel and apologize." "Unfortunately, everything has the mark of the Shen family." "What?" I pointed to every item in front of me. "Everything from the Shen family, big or small, has a mark. If you don't believe it, feel free to check." The entire Gao residence was almost emptied. From the furniture to the earrings, everything was checked, and each item had the Jiangnan Shin family stamp. There were even more items than I had expected. With these marks, Zhouwan had no excuse. What terrified her even more was the attitude of the other ladies. She had always been a concubine and was looked down upon by the other wives. At this moment, they all coldly watched her, none of them speaking up for her. Li Qingrui stood up after a long silence, claiming he was unwell and had to leave first. Gao Shi looked at him with tear-filled eyes. "Your Highness." Li Qingrui didn't look back. Smart as he was, he would never let anyone discover his affair with Gao Shi at this moment. After he left, the other ladies followed suit and left. Gao Shi was completely panicked. "Grandmother, what should we do?" Zhouwan's face turned pale, utterly helpless. They all knew that once the ladies walked out, the events of the day would spread through the court. The Gao family would become a laughingstock. The emperor, who still cared for my father, might even blame them. Zhouwan collapsed to the ground, cursing me bitterly. "Gao Shijin, may you die a miserable death." Gao Shi glared at me fiercely. "Sister Jean, are you jealous of me?" I said, "Ah, I understand. Since childhood, I've been more beautiful than you, and my family has always favored me more. That's why you've become so obsessed and twisted. Sister Jean, you need to learn to be tolerant and magnanimous. Smile at the unfairness of fate." I coldly narrowed my eyes and said nothing. Aunt Shen understood right away and slapped Gao Shi hard. Gao Shi nearly fell to the ground. "How dare you, a maid, strike me?" she shouted. I said, "I told her to do it." "What? Are you angry? You should learn to be tolerant and magnanimous." Gao Shi held her face, shaking with anger. I looked at her dress and suddenly found it familiar. Shin family's new brocade? I've heard it's woven with fish silk, naturally gleaming and rare. There's only one piece in all of the capital. The person who had it made into clothes for me, but it was you who took it. What do you want?" Gao Shi asked, panic in her eyes. "I warn you, don't go too far." "Thank you for the warning. I definitely will." I said, "Come, it's the fabric too. Take off their clothes." I returned from the Gao residence, heavily laden with goods. Li Qingrui had not left yet and was waiting outside. He stopped me. Ajin, I didn't know that you've had such a hard time at the Gao residence. Your Highness doesn't need to know this. All you need to know is that your second Miss Gao has suffered no grievances. His expression changed slightly. I swear, I have nothing to do with Gao Shi. Ajin, in my heart. What's in your heart doesn't matter to me. I got straight into the carriage, shutting him out. In the following days, Li Qingrui tried to visit me several times, but I turned him away each time. The servants from the money house reported that he stood at the gate, looking lost and disoriented. It wasn't surprising. In the past, I had always been obedient, well-behaved, virtuous, and magnanimous, following Li Qingrui's every command. He had never known that I, too, could defy him. Moreover, he still wanted to use me to gain favor with the emperor. How could he give up now? Apart from Li Qingrui, my uncle also visited the money house. He was Gao Shi's biological father and the current head of the Gao family. He resembled my father in some ways, and during my most lonely moments, I had once respected him as my father. Later, I realized that Zhou Wan and Gao Shi's actions could not have gone unnoticed by Gao Sheng. It was only with his tacit approval. When Gao Sheng came to find me, he stood with his hands behind his back, looking imposing. We're all family, why make things so difficult? Apologize to your grandmother in public, return the items, and she will forgive you. I didn't want to say a word, waved my hand, and had him thrown out by the servants. On New Year's Eve, the emperor held a grand palace banquet. Welcoming the new year was one thing, but more importantly, it was to bring some cheer to the emperor. The crown prince, the emperor's most beloved son, had passed away 2 years ago. The emperor, filled with old sorrow, had become increasingly ill. He still hadn't named a successor, which gave people like Li Qingrui an opportunity. During the banquet, a concubine suddenly said, I've heard of the Gao family's 2 sisters for a long time. Today, I finally get to see them together. Gao family matriarch, you've raised them well. This concubine was a distant relative of the Gao family. She had come to help the Gao family out of a tight spot. The emperor lowered his gaze upon hearing this. But he merely looked at me. You look like your father. How old are you this year? Your Majesty, I'm 16. Are you engaged? Not yet. Consort Wang, please take care of this. The daughter of Gao Aiqing, no one must dare to slight her. The emperor's words were pointed. Everyone in the Gao family trembled and didn't dare to raise their heads. Li Qingrui looked at me, his gaze intense. Suddenly, he stood up and knelt in the hall. Father, I ask for permission to marry Gao Shijin. Please grant us the marriage. Here it comes. In the past life, Li Qingrui had proposed to me during the New Year's Eve palace banquet. I had been waiting for this moment. The emperor stroked his beard. Gao Shijin. Present, Your Majesty. Do you wish to marry Li Qingrui? I took a deep breath and said, I do not wish. The hall fell into a dead silence. Because it was so quiet, my answer echoed over and over again. Li Qingrui looked at me in disbelief. Ajin. I knelt on the floor, not even glancing at him. Your Majesty, I have no feelings for the 7th prince. Furthermore, His Highness has clearly already found someone he prefers. Oh?
Who?
My cousin Gao Shi. Before Li Qingrui could stop me, I said, I've seen them together several times. Well, I won't say more. Anyway, I would never dare to break up a pair of fated lovers. I purposely left some things unsaid, letting everyone guess. Since Gao Shi liked to tarnish my reputation, today I returned the favor. Moreover, I spoke the truth. I wasn't wronging anyone. The emperor's expression darkened. Li Qingrui clearly had feelings for Gao Shi, but wanted to marry me. Li Qingrui's intentions were easy to guess. The emperor asked, Qingrui, what do you think? Li Qingrui was caught in a difficult situation. He would never admit to his relationship with Gao Shi. That would be a crime of deceiving the emperor, wouldn't it? He gritted his teeth and said, Father, there must be a misunderstanding. I have always loved Gao Shijin, Miss Shijin. You like her, but it doesn't matter. She doesn't like you. We'll discuss this matter later, the emperor said, waving his hand impatiently. Gao Shi had waited for a long time, but got nothing. The emperor didn't even spare her a glance. The palace banquet was halfway through when I left early. Following the memory of the previous life, I found the fourth prince who had not attended the banquet. Li Chengyun was practicing swordsmanship in the snow. Although it was a wooden sword, the sword's aura was like a dragon, whipping the snow toward me. Before I could react, the tip of the sword was already against my neck. Who is it? Upon seeing me, his expression froze for a moment. Gao Shijin, Your Highness, knows me? He put on a stern face. I don't know you. I couldn't be bothered to expose his lie, so I went straight to the point. Your Highness, can we cooperate? Cooperate with what? I'll provide the money. You do the work, eliminate Li Qingrui, and you can become the crown prince. Li Qingyun furrowed his brows. Do you know what you're saying? I picked up a handful of snow and absent-mindedly shaped it. I know Your Highness has ambition and a drive for power. Last year, during the famine, you personally went to the Northwest disaster zone and caught the corrupt officials hoarding relief grain. Unfortunately, in the end, the credit was taken by Li Qingrui. How do you know? I knew more than just that. Li Qingyun's birth mother was just a minor palace maid, and one day she was favored by the drunk emperor, and that's how he came into the world. That maid soon died in the palace struggles. The emperor didn't love his birth mother, which was fine, but Li Qingyun was cold-hearted and ruthless, disliked in every way by the emperor. He, like me, grew up isolated. Among the princes, he was the furthest from the position of crown prince. But in the previous life, he was the only one who fought Li Qingrui to the end. Though in the end, he still lost. After Li Qingrui became the crown prince, he expelled Li Qingyun from the capital. I remembered this clearly because when Gao Shi slandered me, she mentioned that I had secretly allied with Li Qingyun. Heaven knows I had barely seen Li Qingyun a few times. What was most puzzling was that Gao Shi even produced evidence. Among Li Qingyun's personal belongings, there was my handkerchief. Li Qingrui was furious and threw me into the dungeon, condemning me to a tragic death. When I lived again, I figured it out. What Li Qingrui feared, I would do. After all, it was just colluding with a prince. I smiled slightly at Li Qingyun. Your Highness isn't skilled at currying favor with the emperor, and thus, your salary and rewards are the least among the princes. A prince living in such poverty is truly unheard of. Li Qingyun's eyes turned cold, and he drew his sword again. I remained calm and continued, Your Highness has many things you wish to do, but unfortunately, you don't have the money. Well, now the money is here. Gao Shijin, do you know how the emperor evaluates me? Violent, ruthless, not suitable to be the crown prince. You're betting on the wrong horse. A ruthless person isn't necessarily evil. A kind-looking person isn't necessarily truly good. Li Qingyun paused. What exactly is your goal? To make you the crown prince. No, that's my goal. What about you? Li Qingyun was very clever, and I couldn't help him for no reason. But I couldn't tell him about my grudge with Li Qingrui. I thought for a moment and handed him the small snow rabbit I had just made. Teach me to ride and to practice the sword. I had rarely been outside, so my body was fragile. I had once believed that a woman's weakness was beauty. But now I wanted strength that could rival that of a man. Among the princes, Li Qingyun was the best at martial arts. At the age of 15, he had already shone on the battlefield, causing the enemy to tremble in fear. Although his personality was cold and irritable, when he taught me martial arts, Li Qingyun was surprisingly patient. At first, I couldn't even hold the sword properly. With my slender arms, after a few swings, the sword would clatter to the ground. Li Qingyun probably hadn't seen anyone unable to hold a sword, his expression complex. Sorry, I apologized repeatedly. I'm not usually very active. Is my foundation too weak? It's not your fault. The sword is too heavy. The wooden sword was already light, and Li Qingyun was comforting me with his eyes closed. The next day, he carved out a lighter sword for me. Without the restrictions of the Gao family, I could go anywhere. Li Chengyan took me mountain climbing to practice my body. When we finally reached the top, it started snowing heavily, so we had to find a cave to shelter for a while. I was so tired that I leaned against the stone wall and quickly fell asleep. When I woke up, I saw Li Chengyan sitting cross-legged at the entrance of the cave. His tall figure and narrow waist blocked the snow and wind, and I didn't feel a chill at all. Your Highness is a martial artist. I didn't expect you to have such a considerate side, I said. Li Chengyan opened his eyes. It was nothing. Miss Shijin has a health condition, and you can't be exposed to the cold wind.
Huh?
How did you know? He paused for a moment. Lord Gao is my lifelong teacher.
So he knew my father.
I didn't think much of it and yawned. The snow stopped, and when we returned to the capital, it was almost night. Li Chengyan escorted me back to the money house. Before we reached the door, we heard a commotion. Your Highness, please leave. Our young lady really isn't here today. Where could she go this late? I know she doesn't want to see me, but I'll wait here for her to change her mind. Well, Li Qingrui stood at the door. Snow piled on his shoulders. He was a scholar, not as tough as Li Chengyan, and his lips were already turning purple from the cold, but he refused to leave even an inch. He couldn't go in either, because I had personally posted a sign at the door of the money house. Members of the Gao family and the seventh prince are not allowed to enter. From a distance, the sound of horse hooves reached us. Li Qingrui's face lit up. Shijin, I've finally waited for you. But when he saw Li Chengyan, the smile froze on his face. Fourth brother? Li Qingrui exclaimed, surprised. How are you with Ajin? Why not? Should I be with you instead? I shot back. Ajin, did you refuse the royal marriage just for him? It's none of your business. Can we talk? You've been avoiding me these days, and I have a lot to say, things I can't tell you. I ignore him and respectfully said to Li Chengyan, Your Highness, please take care. Li Chengruo persisted. Ajin, if I've done anything to upset you before, please tell me. I'm willing to change. As for Gao Shi, you really misunderstood. I have nothing with her. When I said I wanted to marry you, I was sincere. I entered the money house and ordered the servants to close the door. Li Qingrui rushed to stop it, but the door slammed down hard on his hand. His face went pale from the pain. The servants nearby were startled and kneeled, begging for forgiveness. But Li Qingrui stubbornly looked at me. I won't leave unless Ajin forgives me. Is he trying to play the sympathy card? I looked away. Then you can stand out there. I only said this, and based on Li Qingrui's pampered nature, I expected him to leave soon. However, I underestimated his determination. The next morning, Aunt Shin anxiously said, Your Highness is still standing outside. What highness? The seventh prince. His arm is swollen up so high. Miss Jean, if the prince freezes to death outside, how do we explain it to His Majesty? She was right. After all, he's a prince, and he shouldn't be allowed to die at the entrance of the money house. I put on a robe and opened the door. Li Qingrui was frozen stiff, looking like a snowman, with snowflakes hanging from his brows and lashes. Seeing me, he revived, believing he saw a glimmer of hope. He tearfully said, Ajin, someone, throw him away. The day of the spring blessing arrived. I went to the mountain temple to pray for my parents. Unfortunately, Gao Shi and Zhou Wan were also there. Zhou Wan sneered, Some people don't know how to be grateful. After receiving help, they get so arrogant. They will be punished sooner or later. I couldn't be bothered to even glance at her. That night, we stayed in the back courtyard of the temple. Aunt Shen went out to fetch hot water and returned with a worried expression. Miss, hurry and leave. We can't stay here tonight. What happened? I overheard Gao Shi talking to someone. She's probably planning to scheme against you tonight. I smiled. Let her scheme. What's there to be afraid of? Miss, you don't know. The person she was talking to is a man, probably a butcher from the mountains. It seems like he's planning to sneak into your room tonight. I was momentarily speechless. Such low tactics were something Gao Shi would definitely come up with. She wanted to ruin my reputation, but sadly, she was a bit too foolish. It's fine, Aunt Shin. We'll just wait here. I sat cross-legged on the bed, practicing the methods Li Qingyan taught me, adjusting my internal energy. Soon enough, there was a knock at the door. "Jean's sister, it's me," Gao Shi called from outside. "I've brought some calming incense for you. I don't want what you're offering, take it back." Gao Shi hesitated, then said, "The monks asked me to distribute it to everyone. Each room has some. Jean's sister, you should take it so no one says I've taken your things." She raised her voice, trying to make sure everyone could hear. I opened the door and gave her a cold look. Gao Shi forced a smile. "Jean's sister, I just wanted to apologize. We've had some misunderstandings, and it was my fault. Please forgive me." She walked in, intending to give me the incense. I stopped her. "Aunt Shin knows how to do it, no need for you. Sister, I just want to do something for you, to make up for my wrongdoings. Go away." As soon as I finished speaking, a few black-clad guards appeared at the door. Gao Shi was startled, thinking they were enforcers from the money house. In fact, they were all sent by Li Qingyun. Gao Shi awkwardly forced out a smile. "I heard the nights in the mountains are unsafe, with wild animals howling. Sister, remember to light the incense so you can sleep peacefully." I stared at the incense, smiling. "Got it." After she left, Aunt Shin rolled her eyes. "That little girl is so despicable."
Yes.
Suddenly, I understood something. Gao Shi didn't manage to ruin me in my past life because she was particularly clever. It was just that she was lucky, with everyone favoring her, whether it was the Gao family or later Li Qingrui. Even though her lies were clumsy, people still believed her. I called in the shadow guards and broke the incense into 2 pieces. "Light this and place it in Gao Shi's room. You're used to doing this kind of thing, right?" The shadow guards didn't speak, but they patted their chests, signaling they were professionals. "Also," I added, "change the sign at the door." The room I was staying in was called Siin, and by swapping it with Gao Shi's room, hers became Suishi. She was now the one staying in Siin. I lay on the bed, sleeping peacefully. With Li Qingyun's people around, there was nothing to fear. In the middle of the night, I finally heard Gao Shi scream. The entire back courtyard was awakened by her. Even the monks came running with brooms. Aunt Shin and I opened the window, enjoying the show. Gao Shi, disheveled, was running out, followed by a brutish man. "Run, you sword person. Where can you go? Just let me finish with you." "It's not me. It's not me. You've got the wrong person. Stop lying. I recognize these 2 characters. Seen? You're the one. I'm the one who gave you money this morning. I paid you to do this. Look at my face." In her panic, Gao Shi let slip the truth. Everyone stood in stunned silence. The room originally belonged to me. What she had been up to was obvious. At this moment, her hair was a mess, and her face was swollen from being beaten. She turned to see me and went wild, shouting, "She's there. She's there. Go find her." She was knocked out by a rock thrown by the butcher. Damn it, I don't recognize her face, but I know it's seen. It's definitely you. Gao Shi's plot failed, and she reaped what she sowed. On the day we went to the temple for blessings, many prominent figures from the capital were present. This matter soon spread throughout the streets and alleys, becoming a topic of conversation among the common people. Gao Shi, once the most beautiful woman in the capital, had now become a rat crossing the street, despised by everyone. As a result, Gao Xing's career was also impacted, and he was repeatedly demoted. Not long after, I heard that Gao Shi had gone mad. On a quiet morning, Zhou Wan knocked on the door of the money house. She was in tears, begging me to help Gao Shi. She said that if I were willing to speak up for her, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, her reputation might still be salvaged. I looked into Zhou Wan's eyes and asked, "Do you remember how my mother died?" Zhou Wan avoided my gaze. She encountered bandits and, unable to bear the humiliation, hanged herself. "Who brought the bandits here?" "I don't know." "You're still lying." I slammed the teacup into the old woman's chest, and the hot tea splashed onto her. She wanted to lose her temper, but didn't dare. Zhou Wan, unwilling to give up, kowtowed to me. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to harm her. Take my old life if you must. But please, Gao Yitzi has nothing to do with this. Help her, please. Fine. I sneered. Let her come and kneel at the door for 3 days and nights, and I'll help her. Gao Shi had never endured such hardships, and now, in her delusional state, she couldn't handle it. Zhou Wan, feeling sorry for her, knelt in front of the money house on her behalf. But her frail body couldn't withstand such torment. 2 days later, she collapsed. The physician said that her legs were ruined, and she would be a cripple from now on. When I went to see her, she grabbed my hand and pleaded, I've done what you asked, please help your sister. First of all, I told Gao Shi to kneel at the door. What does that have to do with you? Second, I asked for 3 days of kneeling. It's only been 2.5 days. I flicked my sleeve and left. 2 months later, after Gao Shi went mad and Zhou Wan was paralyzed, Li Qingyun's plans were unfolding smoothly. The number of people supporting him was increasing. At the end of May, a major incident occurred in the palace. A chronic poison was found in the medicinal meals commonly used by the emperor. This poison caused the person to feel depressed and gradually weaken physically. The emperor was furious and demanded a thorough investigation. In the end, it was discovered that the poison had been brought into the palace by the 7th prince, Li Qingrui. He was immediately imprisoned and stripped of his noble status. Li Qingrui's faction was entirely confiscated. That night, there was a heavy rainstorm. It had been years since the capital had experienced such a heavy downpour, as if the sky itself was about to fall. Gao Xing came to my door, kneeling in front of me, with a thud. Jean Yato, I know you are close to the 4th prince. Please help me. Only 4th prince can save me now. Master Gao, don't speak nonsense. I have had nothing to do with your Gao family for a long time. You're not my little uncle either. Jean Yato, I beg you. The emperor thinks I've been too close to the 7th prince and is considering removing my official title and exiling me. If 4th prince stands up for me now, I might still be saved. I looked him over as if seeing him for the first time. Gao Sheng, you are truly selfish. He froze. When your daughter's reputation was ruined, you didn't come to ask for my help. When your mother collapsed at the door of my money house, you didn't come to ask for my help. Now that your position is at risk, only then do you come asking for help. I paused and asked, do you even care about your family? He lowered his head, looking guilty, but soon hardened his heart and said, when disaster strikes, everyone looks out for themselves. I warned them not to go too far, but they didn't listen, and now they've dragged me down. If it weren't for them, I wouldn't have been demoted. Not going too far? I smiled. So, you're saying that you tacitly allowed their actions, just as long as they didn't go too far? Gao Xing panicked. It's not like I allowed it, I've never agreed with it. Go back. I don't want to hear it. But, don't worry. You won't be exiled. Gao Xing seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. However, he didn't catch my underlying meaning. You won't be exiled, but you will have your house confiscated. Sure enough, in the early hours of the morning, the emperor decided that no one involved in a potential conspiracy could be spared, not even Gao Aiqing's brother. Gao Sheng was a fool, staying in the court with no use, occupying a position in vain. With a decree from the emperor, Gao's house was raided. When the raiders broke into the Gao family's backyard, they found it in chaos. Gao Xing thought he had escaped and called a few courtesans over to celebrate, drinking and enjoying themselves. Zhou Wan, paralyzed in bed, had no one to turn her over, and her body was covered in bed sores. Her expression was twisted with fear. They've come to collect the debt. They've come for the debt. Gao Shi had gone mad, telling everyone she was the crown princess and was soon to be the empress. Someone asked her whose crown princess she was. She replied, Li Qingrui. This answer reached the emperor's ears, and he was furious. He ordered that the bodies of the Gao family members be hanged on the city walls as a warning to others. Li Qingrui was also crippled the next day, his tendons cut and rendered useless. The once famous Gao family of the capital. On this rainy night, blood flowed like rivers. Another year passed. Winter arrived again. The fourth prince, Li Qingyun, finally gained recognition from the emperor for his efforts on behalf of the people. He was named the crown prince. Before the New Year's Eve, I went to see Li Qingrui. He was confined deep in the dungeon, his limbs crippled, and he could only crawl. When he saw me, he lifted his haggard face, which no longer resembled a human's, and tears streamed down his cheeks. "Ah, Jean, you're here," I said. "Before Gao Shi died, she foolishly imagined becoming your crown princess." He smiled bitterly. "I had a dream." "What dream?" "In the dream, you hadn't severed ties with the Gao family. When you were 16, I asked for your hand in marriage, and you agreed with a smile. Later, I became the crown prince, and you were crowned as the crown princess." My heart skipped a beat. That wasn't a dream. He had seen the events of the previous life. I asked, "Then what happened?" "But I was deceived by Gao Shi. She told me you were having an affair with Li Qingyun, and she even provided evidence. I believed it, so I condemned you, and—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "And hanged me." Li Qingrui dared not speak the truth. He pursed his dry lips, his face full of remorse. "Ah, Jean, do you believe me? I never wanted to lose you. I admit, at first, I wanted to use you to win Father Emperor's favor, but I truly believed we would marry each other. I thought marrying you was a sure thing, so I was fearless. When Gao Shi tempted me, I thought, why can't I have both of the Gao sisters?" His words disgusted me. "Ah, Jean, in that dream, you died. I was so foolish that only after your death did I realize I had wronged you." "How did you know?" Li Qingrui lay like a dying dog on the ground. After a long silence, he gently exhaled. "Because Li Qingyun came back to kill me." I froze. In the previous life, he had already demoted Li Qingyun to a commoner and exiled him to the frontier. So, after I died, Li Qingyun had returned? He came back to kill me, haha. He wanted to kill me the day I ascended the throne. He was crazy. And then, I asked. Li Qingyun failed in the assassination and was hit by several arrows. As long as he had a breath left, he crawled, trying to leave the palace. Li Qingrui lifted his cloudy eyes and stared at the narrow beam of light outside the window. That day, just like today, the snow was falling heavily, and the entire capital turned white. He dragged a long trail of blood in the snow. I originally wanted to finish him off with a single strike, but my officials told me he wouldn't survive anyway, so I decided to see what he would do. So I followed him. I saw him crawl out of the palace, struggling, and enter a dilapidated little hut. Inside was your body. My pupils contracted suddenly, and my heart twisted painfully. Those images flooded into my mind. Li Qingyun crawled to your side, holding your body, and only then did he die. That year, the snow fell especially heavily. Li Qingrui finally understood. His fourth brother had come back alone to kill, never planning to live. Not for the throne, not for power. He just wanted to avenge me. I stumbled out of the dungeon. The snow tonight was just as heavy as that day. The heavy palace gates were covered with white frost. Li Qingyun was practicing swordplay. In the vast, snow-covered world, he was the only spot of ink. When he saw the tear stains on my face, he grew a little nervous. "What's wrong? Who bullied you? From now on, I'll back you up." Since my parents died, no one had ever supported me. His words made me cry even harder. I went to see Li Qingrui. Li Qingyun looked disappointed. "Then, do you pity him?" "It has nothing to do with him." "Li Qingyun, tell me the truth. Have you ever seen me before?"
He paused for a long time.
"Yes." According to him, there were 2 meetings. The first time you were very young and caught a cold. Gao Darren carried you into the palace to see a physician. At that time, I was often injured and a regular at the Imperial Medical Institute. I stayed with you for several days. Why don't I remember? You were unconscious the whole time, of course. You wouldn't remember. Li Chungyun took off his cloak and draped it over me before continuing. During those days you were unconscious. Gao Darren personally tutored me. On the last day, he told me I had the heart of a child, then asked me if I was willing to marry you.
What? I was a little surprised.
Li Qingyun's ears turned slightly red. Of course, I agreed. Gao Darren and I verbally agreed, according to your hometown's customs, and I even accepted your handkerchief. But before he could report to Father Emperor, he passed away. No one remembered the engagement anymore. I could guess what my father was thinking. He thought Li Qingyun was a talent with potential. If he were alive, he would have supported him to become the crown prince. Unfortunately, fate doesn't follow human wishes. After a moment's pause, I asked, "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" Li Qingyun smiled bitterly. You were always focused on seventh brother, and Father Emperor had already arranged a marriage for you. I had bitterness in my heart, but I couldn't express it. Anything else? This wasn't the only time you met me, right? There was another time, just last year, you caught a severe cold and entered the Imperial Medical Institute. I went to see you every day, asking about your health through the bamboo curtains.
So it was him.
That was indeed the case. At that time, I was still sick, and Gao Sheng, worried that I might die and cause trouble for the Gao family, took me to the Imperial Medical Institute. I stayed there for a few days, and a young man would always stand outside the bamboo curtains, asking if I was feeling any better. I thought he was just a small apprentice at the medical institute, so I answered him politely. The young man would stand there for a long time and even share interesting stories from the palace with me. The setting sun would cast his thin figure, swaying like bamboo. He would speak to me often, encouraging me to take my medicine. When he left, he would always leave a little carved rabbit outside the curtain. The carving wasn't very skilled, but I really liked it. The Gao family didn't care about me, but the young man and the rabbit became my only companions in the Imperial Medical Institute. When I returned to the Gao family, I resumed my restricted life. I once thought about writing a letter to the medical institute to thank that young doctor. But I was cruelly informed that there were no apprentices in the medical institute that young. Thus, I lost all contact with him. After going around in circles, I finally found him. Someone as lonely as I was. That fleeting moment, gazing at each other through the curtains, was what led Li Qingyun to ultimately march to his death for me. Tears streamed down my face in big drops, and Li Qingyun gently wiped them away. He lowered his head, seriously asking, Jean, will you be my wife?" I stayed the night at Li Qingyun's palace. It was a very pleasant night. Li Qingyun seemed cold on the outside, but in certain matters, he was exceptionally gentle. He would lower his head, kiss me reverently, and ask how I was. The snow fell all night, and neither of us slept. The next morning, it was time for me to leave. I was willing to become his wife, but I didn't want to be the crown princess, let alone the empress. This was my carefully considered decision. Li Qingyun had his own responsibilities. Though reluctant, he respected my thoughts. After giving me everything, he chose to let me go. Aunt Shen had already packed, waiting outside the palace. I rode a horse, using the riding skills Li Qingyun taught me, galloping forward. Once I let go of the capital and the palace, they became nothing more than scenery in my eyes. I laughed out loud, saying, "Look, the capital, it's nothing special." Suddenly, I remembered the question Li Qingyun had asked me the previous night. I said that if I became the crown princess, I would be confined to the palace for life. It would simply be a larger version of the Gao family manor. But a woman's life should not be confined to the home. It should be in the mountains, by the lakes, in the world. There was still so much of the world I hadn't seen, so much I hadn't done. The flowers of Jiangnan, the stars over the desert.
The world is so vast.
I was finally free. The end. Afterward. After Li Qingyun ascended the throne, he did not set a consort for a long time.
Not even a concubine.
And he had no intention of expanding his family. He was truly a strange emperor. However, he governed the country with great order, and it prospered even more than before. In particular, he pushed through a controversial measure, opening the imperial examination for women to become officials. At the same time, the Shin family from Jiangnan established several charitable schools for girls from poor families, providing them with the opportunity to study. The court and the people worked together to select many talented female officials. Li Chungyun chose a child with both virtue and talent from his family, carefully teaching and nurturing them into the crown prince. Whenever someone asked why His Majesty did not set a consort, he would always reply, "I have a wife, but she does not live in the palace." And where does she live? She lives wherever she wishes, in any place in the world, Li Qingyun would say, a rare tenderness in his eyes as he seemed to think of someone. When she returns to the capital, perhaps she will come back. What if she doesn't come back? Then I will go find her. Once the crown prince is capable of standing on his own, I will go find her. When speaking of that person, he would always say I instead of I as the emperor. At times, there were reports of the mysterious empress. She would come and go in haste, occasionally returning to the capital and staying in the palace for a few days. During those days, the emperor would be like a spring breeze, his morning court sessions delayed. He was strict with himself but occasionally took a break, and the ministers were delighted when they saw it. Later, when the crown prince turned 16, Li Chungyun cheerfully abdicated. He eagerly packed his things and galloped out of the palace. He was already in his 30s, yet still appeared like a young man, carefully holding a carved rabbit in his arms. Gao Shijin was waiting at the palace gates. The spring wind was at his back, and his horse's hooves struck with great speed. He smiled joyfully, riding toward her. The end.